The North Rift Lady Lawyers Association is deeply troubled by and vehemently condemns the recent and tragic incidents of gender-based violence and femicide against female athletes in Kenya. The horrific deaths of prominent athletes such as Agnes Tirop, Edna Muthoni, Damaris Mutua, and Rebecca Cheptegei underscore a critical failure in our legal and protective systems and reveal alarming patterns of exploitation and abuse within our sports industry. Further, these tragic events reveal a disturbing pattern where intimate partner relationships have become a source of violence rather than of support. These athletes, who represented the pinnacle of Kenya's athletic excellence, were violently murdered by their partners, with no perpetrators yet held accountable. This profound injustice highlights a broader issue of systemic neglect and an urgent need for comprehensive action. Besides femicide, recent investigations have exposed deeply troubling practices within athlete training camps in Kenya, including but not limited to the following. Number one, forced and negotiated abortions, where female athletes have been coerced into abortions under duress or as a condition for competition. The second one is the control of menstrual cycles, where there's been a manipulation of menstrual cycles to optimize performance, disregarding athletes' health and autonomy. Number three, the falsification of medical documents, where there's been an alteration of medical records to meet competitive needs. There's also the financial blackmail and sexual harassment for selection, where there have been instances of financial extortion and sexual favors demanded in exchange for team selection and entry into elite meets. There is also the taking advantage of new young athletes by diverting and or embezzling the funds gained from their races. These revelations point to a broader issue of exploitation by foreign-based managers, coaches, and unregulated camp operators. Unlike countries with stringent controls like Ethiopia, Kenya's regulatory environment remains inadequate, failing to protect athletes from these abuses. In light of these disturbing findings, the North Rift Lady Lawyers Association calls for the following. Number one, immediate legal reforms. Here we are asking for the strengthening of legal reforms to ensure that perpetrators of gender-based violence and femicide are held accountable and that protective measures for athletes are enforced. Number two, the enhanced regulation and oversight. Here we are calling for implementation of stricter regulations and licensing requirements for athlete training camps and foreign managers to prevent exploitation and abuse. The third one is educational initiatives, where we are calling for the provision of civic education to athletes to inform them of their rights and legislative systems available by which they can protect and empower themselves against exploitation and abuse. The fourth one is increased support system, where we are calling for the establishing of robust support systems, including counseling and advocacy services to assist athletes facing abuse and exploitation. Number five, public awareness campaigns, where we are asking for the raising of awareness about the systemic issues within Kenyan athletics and advocating for comprehensive reforms to address these challenges. So in conclusion, the Lady Lawyers Association are seeking for the following: that the tragic deaths of these athletes and the systemic issues uncovered within our sports industry, there be urgent and decisive action towards the said deaths, and that we remain committed to advocating for justice, legal reforms, enhanced protection for female athletes, including providing for them pro bono services for those who cannot afford, and also providing pro bono services to families of the deceased persons to ensure that they get justice, as well as other victims of human rights violations. We call upon all stakeholders as well, including government agencies, sports organizations, and civil society, to join us in addressing this critical issue and ensuring that Kenya's sporting environment is safe, fair, and just for all athletes, and that we talk more about this issue. We don't hide it. We talk more about it, and we see how, as a society, we can solve it.
Cultural norms. Let us, as ladies, forget about the cultural norms that we have. Like now, if you have a toxic relationship and your culture say, weenda tu vumilia, vumilia tu, maisha itabadilika. And at the end of it, somebody loses their life just because ameambiwa avumilie kwa ndoa, avumilie kwa maisha yenye yako. So we need to have to sensitize our community, especially the ladies, to see that the kind of cultural norms that we follow and are there to, are they really upholding the human rights issues? Kama haisaidii, tuachane na hiyo vitu, tutoke kwa toxic relationship na tuweze kulinda maisha yetu na maisha ya watoto wetu.
Number 2, if you are to become a coach or a manager to manage a certain athlete, this is what is expected of you. In such a training camp, these are the professionals we need. We need a psychotherapist, we need an advocate, we need a doctor, you need a physiotherapist, all that. So that by the time these young ones, because I want to imagine, like, let me take for example, like the issue of football. I'm just diverting a bit. Most of them are scouted from when they are still in high school, correct? Mm-hmm. So the same happens to athletes. Once they finish school, they go to camps. Now, my suggestion would be just to add up on the issue of legal reforms. We do the licensing. When we get that right, I believe we'll be able to cover a lot of things, because once we are able to say that this and this, I'm a such and such a person, are the ones who are required to be in a specific or a certain training camp, then I don't think some things will happen, because in a place where there's an advocate, be sure if there's any wrongdoing, that will be pointed out. It's also difficult. I wanted to make a comment also on the issue of contract. A contract is a personal issue. Yes. And you cannot, once a contract is signed, it has to be enforced. Other third parties cannot come in unless now there are other aspects that can be proven that were not followed. Maybe, for example, like lack of capacity, the person who entered into a contract. Now, all that will boil down to educating the athletes on their rights and also their obligations. Because most of them, you will note that once they enter into a contract, some of them default in their obligations and they end up being sued. Because unfortunately for a contract, it has to be performed by the parties to the contract. So it will all boil down to civic education of the athletes on their rights and obligations.
We are ready to inform them, for example, of their rights within a marriage. What is needed for me to get into a marriage? I should consent, I should be an adult, I should not be under duress and things like that. And what are my rights within a marriage? And even at the dissolution of marriage. And at the marriage, at the dissolution, and even after the marriage. So what are my rights? I think that is where we need to really center on. We need to teach them. And we are ready. In fact, I think we are going to get another focus with my colleagues and see step by step how can we help these ladies to engage with them and to give them that education that they need. Because what I'm getting from your question is that there is that lack of education on their part. So we need to sensitize them and teach them.
I would wish to state that currently, I do not believe the main issue is formulating laws. There are laws that are meant to protect us. There's the Constitution, which provides for the Bill of Rights and the freedoms of individuals, not only ladies. There are the statutes, there's the Penal Code, there's the Criminal Procedure Code. The laws are there. The issue is that what are we doing to implement the laws and ensure that all of us, especially the female athletes, are protected, and to prevent such tragedies becoming a norm in our society right now. So I do not believe that there is actually need to formulate new laws. There are laws that are already in place to protect these women, and our call should be to ensure that all the stakeholders that are involved in the justice system do whatever role they need, take up their roles, and ensure that when a report or such incidences are reported at the police station, all the stakeholders involved should do their part: the ODPP, the police, the lawyers involved, and the judiciary at large, to ensure that all these cases are resolved within the shortest time possible, and so that everyone feels and appreciates that indeed their interest and their interests are safeguarded.